feeling good, can I tell?
Dr. Steering, we're getting back where we're supposed to be.
You're on, brother.
Ready? What's up, family? My name is Brother Ray Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. Oh, look in the refrigerator, let me get that cake and bring it in here real quick. We meet here in honor of William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, Louis Ray Rivera, Elhaz Malik Al-Shabazz, Alton Maddox, Brother Assad, Minister Khalid, Miss Leola Maddox, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune. And the latest one to join the ancestors was Brother Youssef. Brother Youssef was the point man that brought Professor Mackey to the African Echo Study Group on numerous occasions out there with Brother Trust. You gonna say happy birthday?
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Come on, Raji. Happy birthday, dear Ray Ray.
Oh, shit.
Happy birthday to you. Yay!
And 25 more years.
Yay! Today is my birthday. Birthday, December 13th. Today is my grandmother's Earth Day, December 13th. And tomorrow, December 14th, is my mother's birthday.
Sagittarius, there's only one, baby.
I'm gonna give myself a great big hand. So we meet here in honor of these people who gave up fame and fortune. And one thing about Brother Assad, Brother Youssef drove Professor Mackey to the Trust Group, African Echoes, and we just gonna miss him, you know. And we keep these people alive by having these lectures. One thing about Miss Leola Maddox. Miss Leola Maddox worked all the way out in Teaneck, New Jersey, and she had a very old car, and she drove that car back and forth every Wednesday to the United African Movement, because she was dead set on bringing people together for the lectures. She loved it. She worked hard. She ate her dinner there. So we try to keep the process going for people to come together. And with technology and Zoom, you can even be from out of state and join in. So we salute that. So that's why we keep having these lectures. To let the work, because there's a lot of things going on. Brother Raji is going to move the camera over to the Amos collection. Great scholar Amos Wilson, who went beyond the call of duty and left us too early. And we always like to help Zimbabwe and African World Info Systems keep Amos's name alive. Blueprint for Black Power. The psychodynamics of black self-hatred and black self-annihilation in service of white domination, black-on-black violence. The psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. Amos awakening the natural genius of black children. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. Jazz in jail. The developmental psychology of the black child. Issues of manhood in black and white. Distorted, and we have S.K. Damiani, Distorted Truths, the bastardization of African cosmology. And Earl Ponder revealing the unspeakable Bible verses. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Also, Amos's classic, where we have no more, is the falsification of African consciousness. So these books we have to help survival. And for the information people to get and read and study and do the research. So we have some books here in honor of Dr. Randy Short, the only guy I know with a Harvard doctorate in struggle. We have this book in honor of Randy Short. Slavery Mastery, the Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed. I got this book from Trust and Louis Ray Rivera, Jews, God, and History. It's an excellent book with all the stuff that's going on. Dope Incorporated, British Opium War Against the World, and the legalization of marijuana. And the first on page 48 is a picture of George Soros. So if you want to know why everybody's smoking and legalization, you get this book, and it tells you about Satan and the British. Excellent book. In honor of Big Harold, who left us too soon, the transfer agreement, the untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. Found out about this book from Brother Harold, and I believe Professor Mackey might have mentioned it on numerous occasions, but Brother Harold left us too soon. Our good brother, Dr. Scott Whitaker. And if you tuned in on Darren Muhammad's State of the City show this week, he had a whole 2 hours question and answer. His book, Medicine, The Causes and Solutions to Disease and Malnutrition and the Medical Sins That Are Killing the World. Dr. Scott Whitaker got an excellent book, and you can purchase it and find out. The big topic is reparations. This is a book called Without Sanctuary, Lynching Photography in America. And they got a brother here hanging. They have a zoom in on this here, Raji. They have pictures of a gathering where they was hanging us from trees. 3 youngsters being hung. So this book has pictures. Here's a brother in Alabama. Another picture of 2 brothers hanging and they gathering around from trees. As Billie Holiday would say, strange fruit. And when you come up with reparations, and as always, we want to do a study. But the photographs don't lie. Shouldn't have to do a study on that. In my opinion, the only person that cared about the people of Georgia, Cynthia McKinney, when China sneezes from the corona lockdown to the global political economic crisis, in honor of Cynthia McKinney. I picked this up, Capitalism on a Ventilator. The impact of CO-19 in China and the US. And I read a few pages, and it talks about all the stuff going on that went on with ventilators and all the people we lost. Ayo Kamati, Jews are the problem. This is one of the baddest books out. And I brought some from him, and I have here. And Ayo Kamati did an excellent job, and he redid the book for the information that's on here. So we want to give Ayo big ups on his book. And if you go on War on the Horizon, Money Tree Publishing, Ayo Kamati, it's a 6-hour DVD tape. It's called In Black and White. Moneytree.org, and you can help War on the Horizon and Brother Ayo, this guy. This is an excellent, and it will blow your mind. In honor of Dr. Ben, Black man of the Nile and his family. Dr. Ben did this book and he didn't have too much computers, but he also has everything that goes on in the great tombs and the buildings and Kevin, we have this book in honor of Dr. Ben. Can you please lower, can you please be quiet? Can you mute yourself? Thank you. Edward Down. Causes unknown. The epidemic of sudden death in 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, and it's going to be 2025. He was an analyst with BlackRock. And they wanted to find out how all these healthy people was healthy, and all of a sudden they start dropping dead, and BlackRock wanted to know. He has the charts and everything. So this is a good read about the blood clots and what happened after the CO-19. The Truth About CO-19 by Dr. McCullough and Ronald Cummings. This is an excellent book, and these are certified doctors. You can get it on Amazon. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy and his 2 blockbusters, The Real Anthony Fauci and Vax, Unvax, Let the Science Speak. And I'm just going to read the cover page. And this is Vax and Unvax by Brian Hooker. This book is based on over 100 studies in the peer-reviewed literature that considered vaccinated versus unvaccinated populations. Each study is analyzed and health difference among infants, children, and adults who have been vaccinated and those who have not are presented and put in context. Readers will find information, and I repeat, readers will find information on the infant child vaccination schedule, Dermarol and Dermasol and vaccines, live virus vaccines, the human papillomavirus HPV vaccines, vaccinations and Gulf War illness, influenza flu vaccines, hepatitis B vaccinations, the COVID-19 vaccine, and vaccines during pregnancy. Given the massive push to vaccinate the entire global population, this book is a timely and necessary for individuals to make informed choices for themselves and families. And I just happened to stumble on Robert Kennedy's latest. It's called The Wuhan Cover-Up and the Terrifying Bioweapons Arms Race. This is also a bestseller. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I just picked it up, and I wanted the listening audience to know you can purchase these books and do your reading and do your research, because that's basically what it's about. And that's what information is for, is to provide information so people could do their research, they could read, they could study, they could go over the tapes, and come to the conclusion of yourself, because it is about information. Okay, I'm going to read a few community events. Tomorrow, Thorough Black Talk. Ted, Keisha, Ashe, Brother Black, and Sister Marcia. They have their program come on every Thursday on Facebook Live. That's Thorough Black Talk. That comes on 8 o'clock. So Keisha and them is really doing an excellent job. Ladies and gentlemen, our Philadelphia connection, Blog Talk Radio, out of Philly, with Sister Empress Chi and the Million Women's March. That comes on every Saturday at 10:30. And if you got a pen real quick, the number is 1-319-527-6189, and you can join in on the conversation with the Baltimore family, with the Philly family, and people throughout the United States that log on to that program on Saturday night. We want to thank Sister Empress for going beyond the call of duty. Ayo Kamati, in his book, he comes on every Monday on WSYP 95.1, every Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. And you put that on, and IO goes beyond the call of duty. So that's an excellent program. That's Sankofa Revolutionary Radio every Monday at 10 o'clock. Our Baltimore connection, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, Baltimore. He comes on sometime Thursday, sometime Friday, Saturday at 12 o'clock on TuneIn Radio, State of the City, and he's also on Instagram, State of the City, Baltimore. Brother Darren Muhammad has an excellent program, and he comes on Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and you can check him out. Every Tuesday, and I heard he had an excellent program last night, and I missed it. Every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline. That comes on 7 o'clock. Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline, if you Google that, and he's giving out a lot of information. Now, the African Echo Study Group, our family in Newark, New Jersey. African Echoes, the mediator of that group is Brother Truss Graham. Danny and the gang out in Newark, they have a study group come on every Friday at 8 o'clock. And they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. They'll probably be on tonight, and they can put the information in the chat, and you get it, and you can log on to that study group. Also, Saturdays at 1:30, the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park, Brother True, and the brothers out there in Asbury Park, they also have a study group. Brother Truss Graham is the mediator, and they're really doing a lot of good things with that. So we have that, and now, if anybody was able to listen to WBAI today, Dr. James McIntosh and the Simultap organization and his radio program Minefield, they had an excellent, they was playing the tape from the late scholar Dr. Runoko Rashidi, and he was running down a lot of the greatness of Africa. So they had a tribute for him last week. So we want to thank Dr. James McIntosh and the Minefield radio program on WBAI. He did an excellent job. Also, that comes on every Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Also, they're having a tribute for, what's the lady name, Mike, from Amsterdam?
Tatum?
No. They having Nayende.
Yeah.
So they're having a program at the House of the Lord Church this Saturday for one of the editors of the Amsterdam News, a fundraiser for. But if you go on Simultap, you can find out what's going on. The Community Cop program, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, comes on every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. That's Mike Graves, Noel Lee, and Julian. That program comes on 5 o'clock on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. So these are community events that are happening, and you can find out what's going on and get some more information. So ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't tuned in, this is part 6 of our good friend, Dr. Arthur Lewis. You could go on YouTube and you type in BK William Mackey Jr. and all our lectures are on YouTube. And you could go on and start from part 1 and do your research and go all the way to part 6. And Dr. Lewis has done an excellent job on what's going on in Africa and how things are changing. But what they tell you in America is that Africa is just in shambles. And ain't nothing going on, but they're quick to tell you about other places. So you don't look at what's going on in Africa. And that was one of the beauties that Dr. McIntosh did with Runoko Rashidi when he was saying about the pyramids in Kemet and how we lived. It was unbelievable program today. You know. So, without further ado, I want y'all to give a great, and thank the Zoom audience for tuning in and supporting the Mackey's group. I want to thank the people for coming out and coming into the live and supporting us, because we're still going strong and we want to come in to 2024 with more information for our audience. So give yourself a big hand. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring him back because he wants it out. Give a great big hand to noted scholar and our good friend, Dr. Arthur Lewis.
Okay, greetings and good evening. Again, I am honored that you give me an opportunity to come before you so that we can exchange information. And as Brother Ray indicated, everyone who comes here and any other type of audiences like this is that each of us have a certain interest, a certain amount of information. And so what we try to do is to expose the information that we have, we share it with you. And as each speaker, an individual comes up here in this instance, they'll deal with different topics. All of the topics are important. There's no one topic that's more important or less important. And it's in keeping with the way ancient times up to now, most of the information that we present to each other comes by word of mouth. We talk and you explain and then you add on papers and charts. So when someone says, or it will indicate why there isn't, if they say, oh, I want visuals, I want to be able to sit, because I used to do these PowerPoints, and they're very good. All of us will do them. The audience sits, they watch visually, and then they have question and answers, and then you have to ask yourself the question, how much residual information do you leave with the visual? So the reason that we talk to each other. It's very, very important to communicate. And then one of the other important means is to take something in writing, a chart, diagram, that you can look at. You can reread. You can use it as a method to further your education or to help you to decide a topic that may be interesting. So sometimes when I have opportunity and I go on different sites and they're beginning to talk about certain objects, certain subjects, and they mention things, and then to get a better understanding, I'll stop it and I'll go back. As they're talking, I'll stop it and go back. So as you lecture, and I listen to your lectures here, talk, it's to give you information, but you want some of that information to stick to see whether or not later on it may be of importance to you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to deal with 3 subjects. You have 2 sets of papers. You have a paper here. It reads 3 keys to a healthy life. So what I want to do is after we present what we want to present about Africa and economics and other things like that, I want to end with a review of health. Why? Because each of us has information about how to keep yourself healthy. And no one information is better or not. And by talking and discussing with each other, we pass on the information that is critical to healing. So when you're dealing with health, it's a comprehensive item. It isn't, well, if you drink this tea, it's going to be okay. If you run these many miles, it's going to be okay. You want to look at a broader way of doing it. So I use one of the outlines here that we're going to end up with. I will introduce it, the subject, but we have to discuss it. So I'll be introducing what we're going to discuss, and then everybody's going to contribute their knowledge base, and then the community will get it. The sheet that you have 3 pages. So you have a total of 4 sheets. One on health, and then one, if I'm correct, I connected 3 pages. So this presentation is going to be on the short side, so that it'll give us more opportunity to ask questions and to contribute. Each of us will contribute. So what I'm going to do is I wrote out, the staple sheet is 4 pages. So what are we going to do? I have 2 pages that I'm going to read to you, which will take a few minutes, just to get the idea in your mind and what we're going to be dealing with in the future. Then you have the handout with a clip that has 4 pages. 3 of the pages is Smedley Butler. I chose Smedley Butler to review, to keep in your mind, and then I added on that component of Smedley Butler's Wars of Racket. He put together about an 8 or 10 page short essay. So I'm taking from the second part of the essay. So I'm going to ask the questions so that we can hear, and then we're going to present these. Probably at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, however I'm able to insert it, I have maps and charts on what we have been talking about Africa and stuff, but we have to decide whether or not I'm going to present it to you, and we're going to decide later this year, early next year, how we should produce it, we should present it, because there's so much material, so we don't want it to get lost. Okay, so we're going to start here, and I'm going to read these questions. It's a questions on statues. And the next time we meet, I will have the maps and the statues that we're talking about, so you'll have it. So I said, let me open with some questions. By asking questions, you bring information so that no one can say, well, that's his opinion. Everybody has a right to ask questions. doesn't mean that the question is valid or not. So I'm going to read what I wrote here. Theodore Roosevelt Memorial Statue. We're talking about statues. About a year and a half ago, when there was turmoil, whoever in this country, they began to take down statues. Floyd George is holding about racism. One of the statues that were taken down, you probably have seen it before, and I'll give you a picture of it, and we can pick out that picture from the internet. It's a statue of Theodore Roosevelt. If you haven't seen it, they took it out. You go to the Metropolitan Museum of History, which is the official historical statement by the U.S. government of this is who we are as Americans. And when you first come in, there's a statue of Theodore Roosevelt. Big statue, he's riding a horse. And on the right-hand side is a statue of an indigenous person by the features and other things. And that person is not dressed well. And on the left of Theodore Roosevelt is a statue of an African. So Theodore Roosevelt is riding on his horse, walking, and the indigenous is on his right, and the Africans are on the left, stating to the world that this is a white Anglo-Saxon country, and we have a group of people here, one indigenous and one African. And basically the statement is to show who's the boss, the white race. But really it's a snapshot of the history of the United States, because this white man wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this indigenous people's land, and if it wasn't for the African people who built the place. That's the message we wanted to leave you with. So I'm asking about statues. I want us to, next time we meet, see where we've located these statues that the government of the United States has put up in honor of its history. So we're looking for a statue of the first slave in the 13 colonies of the United States. That statue has to be of Irish. They were the first slaves that were brought here by the 13 colonies, or white enslaved Irishmen. The second statue, another statue we're looking for, is a statue of the slave ship, one of the earliest slave ships, 1619. When our scholar sister has a 1619 project dealing with this being the first year when the first slave ship officially embarked on the 13 colonies. Now we're only talking about the western part invasion of what you call the United States. The English, the 13 colonies, that's what we're talking about. So we're looking for that statue, honoring, showing when the first slave ship come here. The other statues we're looking for is the U.S., United States of America colonial independence. What's the day when they say, when the flag was still standing? You hear that in front of all of the things in the United States. They sing the national anthem, right? And there was a big war and the flag was still there after. Okay, so that means George Washington and the colonies. Pardon me?
War of 1812.
No, not the war when they went back. The actual, there was a war in this area with the Northeast. It's a war of independence. And who was in that war? It was the English.
Oh, okay.
Against the white colonists, right? But they forget to tell you, when you see the schedule, the statue, you should see an English component war, and on the other one fighting with them, there were three groups of people fighting the English. It was the colonists, it was the Hessian army, and it was the French army. The colonists didn't beat the English. It was the French military ships, cannons, bullets, and soldiers. The war was between Germany and France against England. They had that rivalry in Europe. It just carried over. So there was no such thing as the colonists fighting and getting the independence. It was the French. It's well documented, but they just don't. So look for that statue where you see the ragtag colonists and you see the French ships, cannons, bullets, weapons, logistics. Because the colonists didn't have anything to fight the English. Then another statue you got to look for is the statue of an enslaved African man being lynched. You've got to look for the statue of the enslaved African woman being raped, because that's the history of the United States. The proud history, I assume. They'll have those statues to remind you of what they did and who ran the country. You need another statue of the indigenous people to commemorate their extermination. You need another multiple statue of the concentration camps that the United States government set up. We're just going through the history. For the indigenous people, they put them on reservations. For the African people, they put us, not only was a plantation, a concentration camp, but also later on, after World War II, they established another form of concentration camp called urban cities. These urban cities are concentration camps. 2 concentration camps for African people. One, we were concentrated on the reservation, that's a concentration, and then we were concentrated in these urban cities, areas called cities. The white concentration, especially the Irish poor, they put them up in Appalachia. And the Japanese, they got their little taste in World War II when the United States took 140 or 50,000 Japanese, mostly Japanese Americans on the West Coast, took all their property, land, and everything, and put them in concentration camps. So somebody might surmise that those people they call Germans, who put people in concentration camps, that was the first. But we know, just go back a little bit further, that in 1900, the English concentrated in South Africa, Africans and their Boer cousins. So Hitler, that concentration is late in the game. And they don't tell you about that concentration of the Jews and let you know there were 6 million Jews so-called killed, 6 million Christians so-called killed. Professor Mackey gave us the documentation, the hundreds of thousands of Africans caught in Germany and the black people coming from Asia. They call them gypsies. So it wasn't just the Jews. And why were they in concentration camp? The war breaks out. Most of the Germans are in uniform. There's a labor shortage. So the people the capitalists run in Germany. Those same capitalists in Germany are hooked up with their cousins, Rockefeller, IG Farben. They worked it together. So there's a labor shortage. So what the industrialists, these same business people you got here, DuPont and the rest of them, but they're equivalent. We need somebody to plant the food, to harvest the food, to mind the children. We need labor. So they went around, wherever they took over Poland and everything, and they concentrated people, put them into these areas. These concentration camps usually were connected to some big industrial. They worked them and worked them and worked them. Free labor, like they enriched themselves in this country of free labor, African labor. That's what the German industrialists, the Rockefellers here, they hooked together, IG Farben. They put these people in. So those white people you call Jews who were they were free labor concentrated in concentration, just like Africans were free labor concentrated in plantation. No difference. And then when they got sick, why are you going to give them medicine and food? They just eliminated them physically. That's what the labor camps were about. Cheap labor for the industrial base of the German, IG Farben, and the U.S. corporation. Then we want to deal with the drug wars. Let's deal with we're talking about the history of the United States of America. we're using examples of this great country.
Right.
The drug wars. The first here, we're going to start with the first Opium War, 1839 to 1842. It was against the Chinese dynasty. They call it the Qing dynasty in China. The war was between the Chinese versus the British and the U.S. The U.S. participated in the first Opium War to crack open China to get the drugs in for trade.
Right.
The second Opium War, 1856 to 1860, again, the Chinese Qing dynasty, but in this case, it was the British again, aided by the U.S. government, and then France added on. Okay? That's the second Opium War we connect the United States to. The third Opium War is the Vietnamese War. 1955 to 1975, Vietnam, United States against Vietnam or Southeast Asia. Drug war. Then the fourth Opium War was Afghanistan War. 2001 to 2021. United States against Afghanistan. When the United States got into Afghanistan, the poppy, you know, that plant that has this narcotic thing. United States, according to their statistics, I could be wrong about the actual number, but it's the concept. The plantation and planting of opium skyrocketed 10, 15, 20 times. Now when the United States has left Afghanistan, the opium poppy production has dropped very low. And one of the reasons is because the Afghan government is now using a lot of that land to grow food instead of the poppy. Maybe this is the reason why there's a shortage of narcotic, and why maybe for some reason the open borders allow fentanyl to flood in. We're only asking questions. We're not stating this as fact. The facts, you can check it. In one of the British newspapers, the Daily, stated that drug monies saved the banks during a global crisis, claimed the UN advisor, and I give you the reference here. Drug money plays a very important role in Western banking systems. Because the drug, most of the people using heroin are white people. The drug trade basically goes to Europe and then the United States. We're talking about heroin. We're not talking about cocaine. Someone could do the further study because in the date escapes me, when they attacked NATO attacked Yugoslavia, 1991, but we're going to get the date. They broke Yugoslavia up, created Kosovo, and put one of the largest U.S. military bases there to facilitate the movement. Then I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to quote a few of our ancestors. What does Dr. Ben mean when he says, you Africans are distinctly different people? This is for you to consider. What did Dr. Martin Luther King mean when he says that the United States is and was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world? What Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said when she indicates that you must understand white racism. And finally, we asked Chris Hedges in one of his works, when he summates the question. He ends one of his works, his question is, he's telling you, quote, white Americans and Europeans are Ice Age cave hunters with a suit and a beard. So he's telling you, don't let the appearance fool you as to their intent of who they are. Then the question was asked, or is asked, or can be asked, because of the America's participation in the transatlantic African slave trade, of which they took a piece of Africa, a piece of the Congo state, and Liberia. Because of the United States' participation in the African slave trade, with the rapes and the lynching, and because we know that there would be no United States to make billionaires if it wasn't for African people. So one of my grandsons, 10, 11 years old, he asked me about billionaires. What about billionaires? I said, yeah, there are millionaires and billionaires. He said, where they come from? I said, the best I could do. These millionaires and billionaires you're speaking of are primarily white men, Anglo-Saxon. Let's keep them in the United States. You can name Trump, or you can name Gates, or whatever it is. I'll give you a little history. These people who you're calling billionaires now, their grandparents, Trump, the rest of them, came to the United States 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. Some of them came in from 1850 to 1924, when 150 million Europeans immigrated outside of Europe, running. And a certain percentage of them came to the United States. So if you look at the ancestors, the grandfathers, the fathers and the great-grandfathers of these billionaires, each and every one, you will find out that they came to the United States off of a ship with nothing in their hands. How did they become a billionaire? When you came to what you call the United States of America and you brought nothing here. So the question then has to be asked, is the government of the United States, it's not a statement, it's a question that it was put here, is the government of the United States, and consider that the United States government fought against African liberation. The Russians, Chinese partially, especially the Cubans, tremendous help in fighting in the 1900s for independence from African nations. And who were we fighting? The United States and Europe. So, the question has to be asked, is the government of the United States, separated from the people, the greatest threat to African people globally? Got a pretty good record to substantiate that. Now, in that 4-page that we cut out, we're going to do the first page. The first page says here, Africa, Asia, African trade. And I made a chart. And what I attempted to do, we're taking steps to show how Africa is in the process of industrialization. To show what is coming to Africa. Who will they be trading with? Because most of the trade that Africa has done in the last 200 years was no trade. We were colonized, and the Europeans were stealing everything they get their hands on, and they killed millions of Africans. Knock off how many millions here in the United States? How many indigenous people were knocked off in Canada? How many millions were knocked off in Australia? In Vanuatu, where I was, they told us there was Vanuatu had about 250,000 people in those 90 islands. And they told us before the European came, there were so many people in the islands that they could just yell and bring down the birds. It wasn't just millions of indigenous people here. Millions lost it in Canada, Australia, and tens of millions of us lost it in Africa. They attempted to exterminate everybody they could, run out of bullets. So we look at Africa and you look at the trade. much of the trade with Africa now is directed towards the United States and Europe, because that was the connection between who came in and took our resources. So what we're going to attempt to do is to show the transition that is occurring in the world, not what I say. Let's look at the transition. We did it, we went before, and I'll give you the maps and charts to show you what the Africans are doing and the trends. So you say Africa is doing trade. Remember, there's something called colonial preference. What it meant was after World War II, when England didn't have any more gold to pay the United States, the Bretton Woods Conference, the white Americans said to their cousin, you have something. The gold, you ran out of gold. France has the 4th largest deposit of gold. Don't have a damn gold mine. That's the theft of the gold from the Sahel nation. Okay? So, we weren't trading. What was your trade done in Africa up until the last, it's what the Europeans took out and traded among themselves. So colonial preference meant the French, the American, they say, you got plenty of gold in Burkina Faso. You have plenty of gold in Niger. The French says, the Americans, the Australians, the rest of them say, give me a piece of that. Each of the European colonies, anything that came out had to be done by that. In other words, let's take Nigeria for instance. Gold, for the gold to be mined, it's going to be exported, it's going to be refined. Anything that's coming out of these African colonies goes exclusively to that in person who got it. Use the United States as an example. When the Britain could no longer pay for gold, the gold they've been stealing from around the world, the United States said, remember that colonial preference? Where only your British corporations can make money stealing from Nigerian oil and the Ghanaian this and South African this? It's called colonial preference. So each of the Europeans said, whatever we got in the colonies, we're going to keep it for our corporation. That's what colonial preference meant. So there was no trade. Now all of that is dwindling away. How the United States got any investments in Africa was because the British had to cut them in to what they were doing in Nigeria, in Ghana, in South Africa. That's how the United States got in when they said their investments there. So we're going to do a snapshot right now to show some trends. In the first page, you see BRICS. BRICS is an organization made up of 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're now adding 6 more countries to the group. As of 2024, they're going to add Argentina, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Why this block is the non-white countries are blocking together globally. Russia, China, etc. We'll go into it. These countries in BRICS now have more economic power and a larger portion of the global economy than the United States and the Europeans put together. So these countries here have more wealth, more natural resource control than the United States and the white people. Go back 30 or 40 years, this vast wealth that Russia, China, and these African and Arab countries, that wealth was in the European pocket. So now, that wealth is controlled by these countries, 11 countries, starting 2024. So let's tell it. It is these non-white countries, the Arabs, the Africans, the Chinese, and the rest of them, they now control, at least according to 40 to 50% of the global economy. Go back to the turn of the century, you weren't in control of virtually nothing. So you now have your control over that. When they meet, they're going to talk about the BRICS Bank, economics, the military, the New World Order, and political. When the white man used to run the globe, it's over. We drop down to here. And I put this chart here, but I misspelled the concept. It should read Eurasian Economic Union. The Eurasian Economic Union is made up of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Russia. That's the Asian-Russian bloc. There's another massive bloc called the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. China, India, Iran, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Observer Group, Mongolia, and Belarus. So you said, why is he telling us this? Because these are the countries Africa is going to be doing most of the trading in the future. Not the United States and not to Europe. Because Asia has the population. Asia has the market. There's nothing in the United States or Europe that benefit African countries. Nothing. And the one classic example, which we go into later, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they each have vast gold deposits, and we know the French have been stealing it. So what these countries have done is they have stopped the production of gold by European. Most of the companies that go into Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, they come from British, UK, Canada, and France. They're stopping those contracts. They're redoing the contracts. And each of those three countries, as an example, has made so they agreement for Russia to come in and China to help them build modern gold refineries, so that instead of them digging up the gravel and selling it for $1 and then ship to Switzerland and ship to France and ship to Canada, for them to refine the gold and make 100 times the value. And it is that gold that is in France and the United States and Canada that they use in their banking system to stabilize the dollar.
Right.
So not only will these countries, as an example, begin to structure so that they can reap the value, it's going to be a massive effect on the European countries, the United States, because they're not going to get the gold anymore. So the French, the Russians and the Chinese, and others, they made an agreement to bring in the oil, the gold refinery, so that the gold will stay. Refineries are going to be built in the next 2, 3, or 4 years. So instead of those three countries using those three countries, they'll be able to dig up, refine, and begin to establish a gold repository. So 5, 10, 15 years. Whose currency is going to be powerful globally? It's going to be the Africans. Just like the president of Democratic Republic of Congo. He says that if we're going to use commodities to back currency, there's nothing to back the US dollar. There's nothing back in the European dollar. So one of these things that BRICS and the rest of them are doing is they're going to discuss currencies, national currencies, international trade backed by commodities. The United States has none. The Europeans have none. That's what's coming. That's what the importance is here. So I give you the list so you will see who the Africans are going to be trading with besides developing themselves. The next presentation, the next part, I'll give you the schematics. And I'll give you a snapshot of what is being done in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso. Under colonialism and colonial preference, the resources of Burkina Faso would go to France. What the Africans Africans have begun to do, and we'll give you the documentation, they're beginning to ban the export of many raw commodities so that they don't ship a big tree out for $1 and then it comes back to them as furniture, $50.
Right.
I was on the port in Senegal one time and they put a tree. This year, you know, the damn tree was about 15 or 20, to about 20 feet. Just the circumference, a massive amount. So those countries that have lumber, they're holding the lumber until they get the refineries. They're holding the gold. They're holding the food. They call it value added. So the Africans are now in the stage of getting, first, their minds are there. They're seeing what could be done. They saw it before. But as China came in to build things, when we did a report on China, China cannot exist as a viable economy without Russian and African food, oil, coal, minerals. So that China is the largest industrial base right now. But if they could not get the things they need from Africa and Russia, they wouldn't be able to be manufactured.
That's right.
So China has to deal with the world because they can't steal it like the Europeans. So China come in and say, okay, we want a railroad system to begin to connect the country. Europeans didn't build it. The United States didn't build it. We make a deal. You China come in and you start building a refinery here, you start building some roads here. We come to a deal, and so that you'll get the raw materials you need, and we will get the railroads or other things that we need. And as the Africans said, the Chinese didn't bring this to us. We had the plan of what to do and how to do it. We couldn't implement it because of the United States and Europe. Now the circumstances have now changed, where we're now able to deal with other people to get what we want and not being locked down by the United States and the Europeans. So it isn't that China is there ripping the Africans off. I'm not going into discussion of any individual contracts and stuff there. That's what's happening. So what they're doing now is withholding the raw materials until they can do value added. For instance, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, they put a freeze on their lithium. Can't take the lithium out. They're going to refine it. In fact, we're going to refine it and make the batteries. They asked this, whatever this guy is, the richest guy come from South Africa. What's his name?
Elon Musk.
And he made his money in that South Africa. They asked him, why don't you come? We're not going to sell you lithium. Why don't you come and put a lithium refinery? No, we can't do that. The Africans say, we want to industrialize. We're not selling you the raw material. They won't do it. But China will do it because China, in order for China to get what they need, you got to get it back. But it wasn't that China brought these ideas and stuff. The African. Now we have other people. And I'll give you a quick preview, which we'll lay it out. At Burkina Faso, who are they dealing with now? They're in a military bloc with Mali and Niger.
Right.
But that whole northern span that we dealt with, the northern part, the Sahel and this so-called Arab part, they were in a military bloc. Because when they were going to invade Niger, what did Mali and Burkina Faso say? No.
Right.
What did Algeria say? Algeria said, I will send troops. We're not going to have to repeat. Tunisia, Morocco, that whole bloc are in a military bloc. Said it's not going to happen anymore. So Burkina Faso is dealing with Russia, military training, jets, helicopters, satellite assistance. Then it's dealing with China for certain development. In Russia, they're talking about a nuclear plant. They're dealing with China for certain development. They're dealing with North Korea for arms. They're dealing with, what's the name? I can't think of it. The brother who's the president of that small country in Southeast Africa. I can't think of him, his name. It'll come to me. They're sending their troops and their police force to go there. Africans are training each other. Ain't no more English, ain't no more. You get the French the hell out. And when you see, the United States has 46 military bases in Africa. And they're not really military bases, they're spy bases. Okay? They set up the base. And they're really gathering information on you. And the Africans are getting rid of the French, they're getting rid of the United States. You got to get rid of them because they're working against you. So Burkina Faso, they're dealing with the French, they ain't dealing with the English, not dealing with the United States because there's not a damn thing that they have to offer. They're dealing with at least 15 countries. Saudi Arabia. Burkina Faso couldn't deal with these countries. You had to deal with colonial preference. Only France. Only the United States. So that's finished. So we'll get into more detail. So what we're just trying to do is show a trend. So the reason this first sheet, because that's who Africa's going to deal with. The next time, let's take Africa here. Most of this West Africa was dealing with the Europeans and America because they had us enslaved. We're going to get a list of ports. There's at least 25 to 30 ports along the east coast of Africa. They're all being upgraded. Massive port facilities here. And you see who the Africans are going to trade with? The Asians. The old Silk Road had nothing to do with China. It had to do with that trade between Asia and Africa, East Africa.
Right.
So given the fact that these African countries are now going to Russia, China, and others to industrialize, who's going to do this? The people in Europe can't afford a damn thing. The people here in the United States, they can't afford to buy. So if you're talking about international capitalism, it's the people of Asia. These nation states that I just read, the development is here. Okay, so big trade is going to come from East Africa back to Asia. It's going to swing back to what it was in ancient times. That's the trend that's coming. And it's here now. South Africa, about 15, they're upgrading everything. The ports, railroads, and everything. They're bringing up each of these different ports. And now the next time we'll come, I'll give you the ports and everything. So you'll see the trend. Okay, so we're going to go, the last 3 pages, we're going to go quickly on Smedley Butler. Remember, Smedley Butler on intervention. We read it before, it only takes 2 minutes. The other 2 sections is on Smedley Butler, but he explains to you how the money flows during World War II. The same thing they're doing here. Send $100 billion to, what's his name? Ukraine. Okay. The Congress people who allocate $100 billion of your tax dollars. Remember we read before that 95% of everything that's done in Congress, state and city, is done for the benefit of the corporation at the expense of the American people. Not black people, white people, all of you. They're stealing all of your money. The Congress. So what did that study, the review it show? It showed that 2 universities did extensive study on does the government pay attention to the American people? And they said 95% of everything passed, federal, state, and city, was done for the benefit of large corporations. By who? Your mayors, your governors, your Congress, and your president. And they say that these corporations give to your mayor, your governor, president, $5 billion a year pocket money, the best government the money could buy.
Yeah.
And then they give back, what do they say, $4 trillion. So in these last two states, Smedley Blunt is going to show you, just like he gave you a nice history of what it's about. All of these wars have nothing to do with you. The 90 billion or 900 billion, whatever trade that was done between China and the United States. Who was it done between? The Chinese corporation or the white Anglo-Saxon corporation? You don't get a damn dime of it. So Smedley Blunt is going to deal with that. He tells you very nicely. So we're going to read War's a Racket to renew for those to let. He's telling you how the scheme works. And it's still working here. So when you send 100 billion to Ukraine, Congress writes it out.
Israel.
And then the Congress gets paid. It's called a military-industrial complex, right? We all heard of that. Military-industrial complex. What does it mean, military-industrial complex? Military-industrial congressional complex. Because it's the Congress that has to give the money. They're going to allocate 100 million, take it from the taxes. Ship it to the Pentagon. By the way, the Pentagon still looking for $19 trillion they can't find. I went to the bank today, I said, did I withdraw $200? They told me every nickel, dime, and penny I had. But the Pentagon can't find 19 trillion of your dollars. Okay? So what it basically happens is those Congress people who get paid, they don't get paid cash anymore, or they don't get paid land. The head of the government of the United States, this woman who just left, stated that Congress people have a right to invest in the stock market. So that's how they get paid. They allocate the 100 billion. It goes to Pentagon, who can never find anything. The Pentagon splits it up 3 ways. To the military-industrial complex. The Pentagon takes a cut, and they give the Congress people. Every single one. Obama, all of them took the money. Your great hero.
Yes, sir.
Took the money.
That's right.
We love him.
In stock and bonds. So you can't say anything. I have a right. Pelosi. She went into Congress 15 years ago, broke. She's worth $150 million. In stock, you can't say anything to her. The Congress people have a right to invest in stock. It just so happened to be in the stock of the company they just sent the billions, and many of the congressmen, after being 5 years, they leave the Congress. Okay, so the Congress allocates 150 to what's it called this place? What's the place? Ukraine. They ship it over to the Pentagon. Pentagon said to the military industrial, you get your cut, I take my cut, and we give the congressman the cut. What are we going to send to Ukraine? We're going to send them all that old stuff, the no good stuff. So 95% never leaves the country. It's split up between the Congress people, between the Pentagon, and the military-industrial complex.
Right, corporation.
In Russia, what's the name of this? I keep blanking on the name. Ukraine. They lost the war already. The war's over, basically. 600,000 or 700,000 dead. Country ruined, they lost it. But who got the 100 billion? And another 100 billion. You know who got it. Russia is the best military force. The strongest military right now on the land. Nobody beats Russia. Why is it that the United States spends more than equal to 10 other countries? In other words, the United States take $100 billion of your tax money for the military. Russia, China, India, you take the next 8 or 9 countries that spend on weapons. The United States spends equal to 10 highest.
Right.
But the weapons are no good. 90% of the money had never makes it into. They just made the F-35, $500 billion for a plane that can't fly. You can't use it in certain. It can't be used in battle. Okay. So what we're saying is, when the Pentagon gets their cut, most of it is pocket. They can't find spare parts. This don't work and that don't work. So you get nothing for your money. According to this war between Ukraine and Russia, it's a proxy war with the United States and Europe. They poured all of that in there. Russia destroyed it all. So, if you and I ran the business like the Pentagon ran, we would be locked up for fraud. So Russia is the strongest militarily. On the ground, nobody beats it. China is the strongest on the sea. Nobody challenges it. So how could that be? How could the United States spend more than Russia, China, and so many other countries? Because it's all in the pocket. Go to Washington, D.C., look at all these big mansions.
That's right.
So, Russia is the strongest military. China is the strongest naval. And I'm a senator. We gotta fight China. We're gonna fight China in 5 years. In order for us to fight China, we need 400 billion more. We need to make more. This ship, by the time they take more and more money, what are you doing? We're building more ships that don't work. We're building more to prepare for a war with China. So one of the white ex-CIA, he coined it, at least the first time I heard. We know about it's called the congressional, what is it? It's military industrial complex. The military, that's the Pentagon industrial congressional complex. They take your money.
That's Eisenhower.
Pardon me?
He coined that phrase.
Yeah. And now some of these other people added, they call it AIM. A-I-M. It's called the academic, intelligence, and academic intelligence and media. The things they're using to keep you in the dark and to lie to you. Full scale. So you don't know what's going on. So we're going to spend the butler for those who had it. We're going to read quickly. He tells you the racket, how it works is exactly the same they're doing here. And in the second two, he tells you where the money's going. Then we'll finish this presentation. We'll do question and answer. Then we'll finish it with the health. So what we're doing here is putting the pieces together, primarily around Africa, to show what they're doing in terms of the economies, the industrialization, the fact that, like Burkina Faso, they're not dealing with the West anymore. The Chinese and Russians, they had a meeting in China last month, the Belt and Road Initiative, because China has to get out there and make things for people. Let's run a road, let's build a port, let's build a university, and then you give me something to change some natural resources. Most of the countries around the world, coming from under the United States, and this Ukraine-Russian war is good, because now the rest of the world knows that the United States is not going to be able to bother you anymore. Because like Burkina Faso, you want to build your military? Who's helping them build their military? They're recruiting. They're building a military. Russia's helping. China's helping. North Korea's helping. The president, I can't think of his name, Nigeria isn't. So you can build your country, you can industrialize your country, you can deal with your country to a point where you can bring your country up. Amen. So in about 15, 20 years, Africa is going to bypass China as the industrial base of the world. Industry moves around, nothing stays. When they took us out of Africa, they took us for our skilled and unskilled labor. How to work cloth and how to work metal. That's the Industrial Revolution, the British. So if they can take the technology and bring it from Africa and take it and put it in the United States and Europe, and then we continue to develop it, then the Europeans in the turn of this century were the most industrialized group. United States and whites, the most industrialized. Before they went into Africa, they weren't industrialized. They industrialized after. So now they got the industry. Then what did the United States and Europeans do? They took the industry and they sold it off to China, right? So that's how China got industrialized. The white people, white Anglo-Saxon males, the billionaires whose grandparents came here with nothing, then you ask how they got something. They say, we want to make an automobile. Why are we going to pay these white people $20 an hour? We can let Africans come from the South. We'll pay them $10 an hour. Why are we going to pay the Africans or the Europeans? We can ship it to China. So let's say who did it? The billionaires, the white Anglo-Saxon men. I keep saying it. They're white because I'm using their term on race. They're Anglo-Saxon, they're all British and stuff. The Jews, Judaism is a religion, don't mean anything. The bankers, the industrialists, and the presidents. All of the presidents from this, who's the president that got shot, the white guy? I can't think of it. He started it. And it went through Clinton.
Reagan?
Huh?
Reagan?
Yeah. It's the deindustrialization began. Yeah. Then it went through all of the presidents. Clinton.
Outsourcing.
Pardon me?
Outsourcing.
So they outsourced 50 million jobs. Gone. Most of those people who had jobs, those good jobs, were white.
Right.
That helped to crash. When you see this massive homelessness, the white economic community is in deep trouble. Because those 50 million jobs that they outsourced to China were mainly white. No 3 cars. Reagan didn't stop it. Obama didn't stop it. Nobody stopped it. They all took the money. You take the money, and if you don't want to, 20 minutes without oxygen and you're dead. There's a lot of ways to kill people. So they outsourced the jobs. Then they outsourced the factories. So while the United States is deindustrialized, now you have Russia, you have China, you have Brazil, and you have Africa coming. By the time, in 10 or 15 years, with 1.5 billion people, young, healthy people, African people, 15 years, 10, 15 years, at the rate Africa's industrializing, they're going to be the center. The center was Europe at one time. They shifted it over to China to industrialize China to make money. Now it's going to be the massive center because Africa has everything. Nobody has what it has. So that's going to be your industrial center. For those of us who's still going to be around here in 15 years or 20 years, I'm going to be one of them. So I'll speak for yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay? So we're seeing the trends. So what happened is there's no industrial base here. Why is that important? Now that you don't really have to worry about the Europeans anymore. Because you have China, Russia, they're going to build you up and your weapons are going to be just as good as theirs. They had a Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road, they call it BRI. 150 countries are sat down in China working deals for roads, for industrialization, for factories. Tens and tens of billions, and that money is between who? Who's sitting there? Those are Africans sitting there. Those are Arabs sitting there. Those are people from the Caribbean. The non-white people now are going to do what they want to do. Industrialize or whatever it's going to do. No longer, the United States is in economic depression. Because Africa has cut Europe off from a lot of the raw material, and because the United States blew up the pipeline, Europe is in an economic depression.
That's right.
Why? Because two things. You can't steal the natural resources, and you need cheap oil and gas. So Europe is officially in a deep recession, depression. America is right behind them, and Africa is just beginning to flex its muscle. You look at the ports, that you see the pictures of the buildup of the ports and the roads and stuff, and you look at what's here in the United States of America. So what you have here is a result of a handful of Europeans who found themselves rich because of the takeover of the Americas and because of African. We did most of the inventions here. We built the damn place.
That's right.
So now Asia is the center of industrialized countries. China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, now a little India. They have the center of the industrial base. No longer the United States and Europe. That's gone. If Africa wants it, it will be in Africa. If Namibia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa shut down cobalt, nickel, the rest of the world is, everybody's coming there. You have everything. Now you're controlling it and you're stopping the theft. Okay? We know about this leader didn't do this and this leader. We know about the corruption that's in Africa, like all places.
Right.
You know, what are you talking about? That's what they cite. But let's look at the industrialization. Let's look at where the population is going. Then you can do the little petty thing. Oh, is everything equal here? And we won't hear that. Museveni did this and he didn't do this. Uganda is in the process of developing an oil pipeline from some of the oil fields in Uganda, taking it through Tanzania. 10 years ago, the United States and the rest of them will invest, thinking that that oil is going to be brought out and put on a ship for white people. No, Tanzania and Uganda said, no, that oil is going to come out. We're going to sell some. We're going to make ourselves more independent, and we're going to use the oil to industrialize. Because Museveni said, why are we sending this cocoa away for these pittance and it's coming back to chocolate? So you have certain trends that are occurring. You have coups that are getting rid of it. Niger. You kicked out the Democratic elected Bassoon, a person who's selling your uranium for 80 cents a pound and everybody else is selling it for 200 a pound. That's why they got rid of them, as an example. And you're going to get rid of the rest of them. Any country, the leaders of any country in Africa, the leaders are going to be made accountable. We don't want you to sit up there and have a handful of millionaires and billionaires. A friend of mine, a young person, asked me, remember I always say what was most important? The two most important jobs in any society is women making babies and farmers making food. You can play with whatever else you want. Be realistic. No billionaires. the place has to develop for everybody. Yeah, you're going to have a handful of people making a little more money, but none of this Western type of nonsense. There's too much wealth and too much. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, one country bigger than all of Europe. So, when Uganda and Tanzania, so we're going to run this pipeline, we're going to take it out there, and we're going to, Europe, America, and England, France, they all pull out to stop the project. You don't want oil. It may hurt the economy. It may hurt the soil. What they call this warming. Trying to talk to Africa, you shouldn't be using. So they said, wait now, when you were stealing our oil and the Arabs' oil,
right.
and the United States was stealing Venezuela's oil, oil is what you need. If you don't have oil and gas, you cannot industrialize.
Right.
You can't have anything. And then they said, okay, and Mussolini said to your white Americans, before they put up a black face. So they tell you, don't bring these black people here talking nonsense. They tell Obama, leave Africa and don't come back. Kenya, he's interfering with the Kenyan election. For the United States whites, they told him, leave and don't come back.
Right.
Even Mugabe tell him, don't push homosexuality here. You were born of a man and a woman. So the Obamas and all these other damn people that serving white interests, just step aside. No more of this. So, who's going to help Tanzania and Uganda? Chinese stepping in? So now, it's a joint project between Tanzania, Uganda, the China said, I'll put in, and the French company. They told the French company, you can leave if you want. They said, no, I'm leaving. The French want a little piece of it. So now it's a consortium, they're going to get the pipeline. But it's obvious, they told the Europeans, you're telling us, then they said to the United States, so why don't you go to the United States and tear up all the damn pipelines? So the Africans are past this thing where they could be sold a bill of goods about what to do and how to do it.
Right.
And that's why we're talking like this, so that we said, damn, Dr. Lewis, he's full of it. Then start digging, start seeing, see what they're doing. Okay, let's read Smedley Butler to give an idea of how the United States, he uses the United States of America. But it's all the Europeans. The United States come late in the game. Smedley Butler, again, was one of the highest ranking white, he's a poor white, he wasn't in money, white general who came up high in the
Marines.
Yeah, Marines. So let's see what it is. This is a short synopsis. I first heard it, like many of us heard it, 30 years ago on WBAI. Yeah. The information got to circulate. And this is what he said. Now, Smedley Butler, a general, a retired general, he's died in the 40s, and he was very upset about the way the United States government mistreated the veterans. You can't get this, you can't get this. You remember when somebody asked Eisenhower, one of them, with the troops, when they were after World War I troops, the World War I veterans came to D.C. for pay, they killed them, they broke it down. He was upset, so he wrote it. So he's telling, this is a white general, retired. He died. He was mad as hell. So he said, I'm writing. He began speeches, everything. He says, war is just a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of the people. Let's ship all the jobs out. Don't say anything. We paid Congress. We paid the president. That's why I asked, is this government a threat to African people globally? It's a threat to everybody. Only a small group, only a small inside group know what it's about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses. All your tax money going to the military, and the other third of your tax money going to the medical profession. The three things you're going to die from in this country: The biggest killer is cardiovascular disease, stroke, and heart. That's all food, etc. The third thing that's going to kill you is cancer, with all of the toxins in your air, water, and food. And the second biggest killer of Americans is the medical profession. 700,000 Americans killed every year by the medical profession intervening when it didn't need intervention.
Say that number again.
700,000. They wrote a book, Gary Nolan and some others, they put his name on it. It's called Death by Medicine. A little $6, $7. Death by Medicine. Where a few of the doctors, statisticians got together and they looked at it and then said, they come up with the figure of 700,000 documented people killed every year by the medical profession and things that were done to you that should not have to be done. The best part of medicine, as we were discussing, is emergency medicine, because you know what to do. Cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke from diet and lifestyle. When you touch that position, that's the second biggest killer. And then the third is cancer because of where it comes. So just put that in perspective. So 1/3 of your tax money go to the military-industrial complex, go to what they call Pentagon and your corrupt legislature. Another 1/3 of your tax money goes to the medical profession to take you out. And the last 1/3, you figure it out. Okay. So we're talking about these white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men who are your billionaires running the country. I believe in the adequate defense at the coastline and nothing else. If a nation comes over here to fight, then we'll fight. The trouble with America is that when the dollar only earns 6% over here, then it gets restless and goes overseas to earn 100%. Then the flag follows the dollar and the soldiers follow the flag. That's your sources of all these wars this country runs. I wouldn't go to war again. I have done a protest. I won't go to war again as I have done to protect some lousy investment of the bankers. There are only two things that will require me to fight. One is defense of the home and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. He's bitter, he's complaining because of the mistreatment of the white, most of the veterans, many of them were, most were white, how the white veterans were treated. And so he's telling it.
Oh, and the black veterans
Yeah, the
did
same
not get
thing.
all their benefits.
I
am one.
Right.
Free
Exactly.
college.
Then
Did
it
not
says,
pay my free college.
right. There isn't a trick in the racketeering book bag that the military gang is blind to. It has a finger man. That's propaganda. To point out the enemy. It's muscle men, the military. To destroy the enemy. They're brain men to plan war preparation and the big boss super nationalist capitalism. It may seem odd for me, a military man, to adopt such a comparison. Truthfulness compels me. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active service, military service as the middle of the country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissions ranked from second lieutenant to major general. And during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscleman for the big business, the Wall Street, the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer for gangsters, capitalists. He tells you who your problem. The same people who send out all the jobs, the same people who lie, the same people who kill you by medicine. I suspected I was just part of a racket at that time. Now I am sure of it. Like all of the other members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own until I left the service. My mental facilities remained in suspended animation while I observed in order for higher, the typical ones in the military service. Then the history, little bit of the history, as he ends it, this part. So he's giving you to tell you what they were doing. This was a time when the United States was invading and stealing from the countries close to it. 1900s. They weren't out there active like they're now in Africa and Asia, all over the world. I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for the Americans in the interest in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenue in. I helped in the raping of a half dozen Central American countries for the benefit of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers, 1909, 1912. Whereas I've heard that before. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the sugar interest in 1962. China helped me to see my way for Standard Oil. Telling you all the people that they stole from, invaded. During those days, I had what the boys would call in the back room a swell racket. Looking back, I feel I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could have done was operate a racket in 3 districts, 3 continents. So that was his excellent synopsis of what United States foreign, that's what foreign policy is. That has nothing to do with you. We're going to end, before question and answer, to read war as a racket. Now he's telling you the specific that kind of verifies where your money is going between the Pentagon, the Congress, and Pentagon, Congress, and the military industrial. This is part of Smedley Butler's. He says, war is a racket. It always has been. It is possible the oldest, easiest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. He's talking about these wars. You can take Iran war, this Ukrainian war, all the same. That's what's behind it.
Business.
Raping, they rip you here and they rip you there. When they went in and knocked off Gaddafi and took all his gold and silver, did you see any of it? It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses are in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to be to the majority of the people. That's why they gotta lie to you. That's why they gotta have information and intelligence and teach you in education in school. You can't let the people know what's going on. You tear the damn place down. Only a small inside group knows what it's about. It is conducted for the benefit of a very few at the expense of the very many. Out of the war, a few people make huge fortune. In the World War, a mere handful garnish the profits of the conflict. At least 21, I think he's talking about World War I, but let's see. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. I don't know if he's talking about, well, it could be one, at least 1 or 2, because he lived to the second, so he didn't specify here the war. So he's telling you, then he goes on. That many admitted their huge blood gain in their, he says, that many admitted the huge blood gain in their income tax return. How many other war millionaires falsified their income tax return? No one knows. They didn't report nothing. How many of these war millionaires, that's where you source your billionaires and everything, these wars, business, free money from the IMF, free money from the Treasury, don't pay taxes, that's how it is.
It's the war for its money.
How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it means to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightening nights, ducking shells and shrapnel, machine gun bullets? Send Ukraine? All this door. Russia is documented. They're saying Ukraine lost at least 700,000 dead Another 200,000 wounded. The country is destroyed. And the United States said it from the beginning. Russia said, come to these terms and we'll, we can't go into detail. We will stop this intervention. They were ready to sign. Ukraine was ready to sign. The United States went in, the British went in, and they said, no, you can't do that. And then they took the war. And just what the young lady said, and just what he says here. The billions and billions and tens of billions. The United States President and Congress people stated, we are using Ukraine as the buffer to weaken Russia. The guy said, this is the best money we ever seen. So the corrupt government of Ukraine got almost 1 million people dead and scarred. They said Ukraine before the war had about 50 million. They down to less than half. They slept. Dead, and they slept. It's a destroyed country. So Ukraine took the money to use their children as fodder for Zelensky and a handful of people to make out very well. The hundreds of billions of dollars that was spent is in the pocket of these military-industrial complex, in the pocket of the Pentagon, in the pocket of every one of your congresspersons. McKinney, I believe, said they talked to her and asked her to sign an oath for Israel. She said, I ain't signing that.
Exactly.
So they worked to get her out.
That's right.
All of the other people who work for the government of the United States in incapacity, they take in the money. They have a right to take the money. Don't come to me and tell me about what you did, your figures that go on the t-shirts. You're in a war here. Okay. How many of them spent okay? How many of them parried the bayonet, thrust of the enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle? Out of the war, nation requires additional territories. If they are victorious, they just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few. The same for the few who wrung the dollars out of the blood of the living. He's telling you, we don't go in. How many Frenchmen, when they plundered Burkina Faso, or Niger, or Mali, all of those years, what percentage of the French ever see it in? Nothing. What percentage of any one of us, black, white, or green, got the big? That's where you get your billionaires. Like I told a person, I'll give you an example of billionaire. You want to be a billionaire? I said, you sick. You're going to die. Put you on the table. There's a sack of gold here. And here's oxygen here. You can't have both. Which one you want? You can't have both.
That's how they roll.
If you don't take that oxygen, you'll be dead in 20 minutes. Very few people can survive without oxygen in 20 minutes. So I had to explain that to a person. That this thing about wealth, and these people are living luxurious. Any country, and you always want to point, oh, the Africans and this and this. The biggest, most corrupt people at this point in history are your white people.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, black people are greedy and all that. You can say whatever you want. We're looking at what happened in the last 200 or 300 years. Okay. Okay, let's finish out. The bill renders a horrible accounting. New place gravestone. Mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes. Remember, your Congress people, your president is sticking the money here. He got a home here, and a home here, and a home here, and a home here. It's okay they have the home, but don't come and tell me economic instability. Now you got plenty of that here. Depression and all it attends miseries. back-breaking taxation for generations and generations. That's what you did. For a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war was a racket until I retired to my civil life did I fully realize it. Now that I see the international war clouds again gathering as they did before. He's been through it. He's telling you what the racket. He said, tell you the racket. You're in the racket.
You have cancer and you don't.
In this section, they talk about French and stuff. We can overlook this. Let's go to this last section. Of course, for this loss, there will be a compensating profit. Fortunes will be made. Millions and billions of dollars will be piled up. But a few mutinous makers, bankers, shipbuilders, manufacturers, meat packers, speculators, they would fare well. These are the big people who spend the money to what you call this thing? To corrupt. Now, if you have to assume in this particular country, the people who run this country, I remember, some of the newer, let's take a 30-year period back, and there were some international delegates or diplomats, they told the white people, they're white, if you want this country, U.S., to stay strong and powerful, you must use the best talent that you have, regardless of color and all that. Of course they didn't do it. The white boys, the dummies, they get everything.
Homeless in the desert.
Okay. So, one of the results that you got is they deindustrialized the country. The country industrially it's gone.
Right.
And then let's finish out. He said, what does it profit the men who are killed? So you talk about all these billionaires and everything, big money here. What to profit the men who are killed? What does it profit the men who are maimed? What does it profit their mothers and sisters, their wives and their sweetheart? What does it profit their children? What does it profit anyone except the very few on whom war means huge profit? Yes. And what does it profit the nation? Take our own case. Until 1898, we didn't own a bit, then he goes on. He's telling you what you are suffering, regardless of whether you admit it, as a result of the monster. So if you were to go back, and that's why we repeat over and over, you cannot ignore the history of the United States in anything that you do or that you did. We can break for questions and answers, because we have plenty of time, and then we'll do the health component. And we need anyone here who has anything to say, to add to contribute, to contradict. We need information. I'm only one person from my own person. People have traveled all around the world. We need everybody's input to see. And we wanted what you say to be directed towards the development that is occurring in Africa. Now, we are, I'm going to quote, okay, let me say it this way. Martin Luther King, you know, I just make a mention because that's who they put in your face. You know Obama, you know we had white girlfriends, right? Before. You know this, correct? I said it had nothing to do against him with white people. The point that I'm making is that connection, romance, because he grew up in that environment.
Right.
Let's listen to what he was probably told. Look. Y'all may not like what I got to say.
Barry?
When you get somebody out of your race, especially a man, you get an inferior product. That's my personal opinion.
Yes.
About what Dr. Ben said, we're distinctly different people. We can have children in the 30s and 40s. Not them. Men and women of color have equally strong bones. The European woman who has osteoporosis. There is a difference here. So they tell Obama, look, we're grooming you to be the president of the United States.
Yes, sir.
You got all these African countries, all these countries, we got to show that we're not racist. So one of the conditions, and he met these conditions, it was Reverend Wright, his good friend.
Jeremy
He said, Jeremy Wright, give him up. Give him up. They introduced him to his wife. What's her name? I'm very fan. His wife with the Michelle. They introduced her. You got to get rid of the white woman. Ain't nothing wrong with the white woman. You can't. No, we can't. We have an image of a black man and his family. This interracial stuff, though, this is going. So he had to give her up. He made the decision.
Because the Klan would have been.
He made the decision like you have. They have a prototype of everything. You have a black doctor who will sell you behind out. Give them all the pieces of paper. So you got some of everybody. But right now, the system, they didn't listen to Brennan when he said you take the best.
He had protocols that he had to follow. Protocols.
That's why I say he took the money.
Right.
And respect him for taking the money, but don't tell me that this man, I said Malcolm didn't take the money. King didn't take the money. A lot of people didn't take the money. My father didn't take. My wife asked me, what is it that your father, how would you remember him? Of course, my mother and grandmother, how would you remember your father? I said he was always there. Married to my mother 65, 70 years before they died. He was always there. Truck driver, gambler. You got to do something to feed your family.
Right.
Now, I don't know if he did any hits, but I know he was a truck driver and a gambler. Come in, put some more water in the soup. There were 8 of us. And people in the South Bronx, when I was growing up, people would come to our house to eat.
And there was 80.
This is, me personally, I asked the question before and I'm asking again. Is the government of the United States the greatest threat to African people globally? My personal opinion, yes. Given the history, you do what you want with it. We're only dealing with the history here. So, and I'll end here, then we go. America is an exceptional country. Everybody's saying it. White, this one bombed the whole bit. We the best. Okay, let's look at your exceptional country. You have United States of America, 4% of the world's, I'm just quoting figures, 4% of the world's population. Half of the people in the United States are not, according to the white man, they're not white. They use Iranians as white to bring the numbers. So if we follow the U.S. Census, then if the United States only has 4 million people, I mean, they have 4% of the world's population, and half of them are white, and half of them are black. So you're saying the exceptional country in the world has less than, and of course whites are the exceptional people. You got 2% of the world's population, so-called exceptional. Did you ask exceptional in what? In negative birth rate. And we're in here. Niger has the largest birth rate. When we remember the sheet we gave with the statistics on the birth rate, almost every country has a positive birth rate. There are a couple that's very, very high. Every European country, all European people included here, are negative birth rates. For whatever the reason, they're all negative. The highest birth rate are the Africans. Then next, you put in, well, Africans around the world. Well, if they look, the highest birth rate are, say, so-called, are the Africans in Africa. Because when I think of Africans, we went through this before. You got 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, whatever it is in Africa, 1.4 billion. Oh yeah? How many Africans on earth that are not in Africa? We went through this before. There's 1.4 billion Indians. They say 1/3 of those are us, straight. The Adivasi, the people of the beginning. That's what the Indians say. It's you. Malaysia, the whole thing. So the way I count, you got 1.4 on the continent. You got 300-400 million sitting in Africa. We don't run India. Then you drop another 100 million or whatever it is in Brazil. Then you drop off in the United States, whatever it is. Now you, the exceptional people on earth are white. No, Americans. You're exceptional. And you're talking about, you have in this population, 2% of the world's population. And you got a continent. Right now, they say, is at least 1/4 of the world's population. 1.4, 1.5. I remember on the radio station, I was fortunate enough to talk with him, when Lame brought me on for a short period of time, we were talking about AIDS. And he says, there's 600 million people. That's 20 years ago, so 600 million people in Africa. Ain't nobody, 600 million people in Africa. I said, no, they're not. He said, what do you mean? I said, they're not. There's at least 1 billion people in Africa. He said, the CIA said there's 600 million. I say there's 1 billion. He said, how do you say it? Because they weren't counting and I wasn't counting. However they get these numbers. So the statisticians say it's 1.4. The birth rate is highest in Africa. And at the rate, if these numbers hold, 2050, 1/3 of all human beings will be an African on the continent. That's 1/3. Now you got to add another, I don't know, % of all the Africans that's outside. Go on.
I'll wait till the Q&A.
Go on. Okay, so the point that I'm making, there's no such thing as exceptional people. But if you want to start playing all the race cards, we're going to be here. We got the land. We got the resources. We're going to be here. And that's what's important to me, that you got to make babies. You got to go to this. And about Africa starving, Africa has 65% of the world's arable land. It's a nonsense. Now, when they redo it, and then when they finish with the trees along the Sahara, we're going to have 70% of the world's land. Africa's starving. You feed Europe and you feed Asia, that's going to stop. So when we show in here, and as it goes on, this is the center. Population, natural resources, and finally, you want to know who is who in antiquity? Go to all your museums around the world. The only thing in there is something from Africa, or the African people around them. Okay?
That's right.
So that's why it's important for all of our lectures and everything we do, everybody to put in to see what's coming, what is and what's coming.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a quick... You want to do question and answers?
Soon, we don't have to break if you don't
We're
want.
going to do a
break. Let's go right.
We're going to do a quick question and answer. The first question will be from the Zoom audience. Does anybody from the Zoom audience have a question for Dr. Lewis? Going once?
Peaceful greetings. My name is Leona. I reside in the state of Michigan. I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank Dr. Lewis for his presentation tonight. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much from the Motor City. Appreciate you. Okay. The next question is from the floor. A question. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Yeah,
big guy.
Okay, wanted to just point out that in President Eisenhower's farewell address, and to those that might have forgot, you know, he was on his way out, and President Kennedy was on his way in, to those that might not remember it, in 1960. In his exiting address, he warned America of the military-industrial complex. So much of the election was predicated on that,
Yes.
and you even used Smedley as a reference, but a U.S. president going out warned. In other words, that was in existence, but it was getting stronger and stronger and more influential with, as you say, elected officials and businessmen. So he pointed that out, and just wanted to also point out at the same time that the military-industrial complex has the military intelligence. It has killed major black leaders all over the country. As you said, certain people that didn't take money, they were removed. Whether it was Fred Hampton, whether it was Malcolm, whether it was Martin, the military-industrial complex played a major role in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And just want to point that out, that we were warned by a president, a sitting president who was exiting.
That's what you say. Is the government of the United States the greatest threat to African people globally? History has a good leaning towards them. If you can find another country in the last 200 or 300 years who have given Africa. Now, we know about 7/11 when the Arabs came, and then what you call these, Caesar, Italy and all that. We know about that.
Right.
Since the 300 or 400 years that white people got out, Africa, the biggest headache, biggest problem we've had as a people right now is the U.S. Before it was France, and before it was Spain and a few, but the United States, because of the way it is, dwarf. Is it the greatest threat to African people globally? You got to ask yourself that question. Brother?
You said that Africa had the plans to build the roads and the bridges and do the refinery, but the plan was stymied, and now the plans can go into effect. What was the change that went from not being able to do it to being able to go ahead and do it now?
The gun.
The gun.
The gun.
Okay.
Absolutely.
In Vanuatu, when I got there in 1979-80, we celebrated first year of independence. They were independent on paper. The French and the English still had everything. Father Lenny and the rest of them said the French were hunting them. Okay, we were there after 3 months. We started wondering, why is it the government doesn't let me and my wife and some of the other brothers and sisters who had come, Dr. Ben had sent all of us to go to the other islands. We found out later that Father Lenny had gone to Papua New Guinea. Father Lenny is the first president of Vanuatu. He had gone to Papua New Guinea, and they got up troops, military troops, weapons, guidance and stuff. And they came back, and they were fighting the French and the English in the outer islands. A lot of people were killed, they said. Then when they were able to defeat that military component of the English and French, then Vanuatu said, now we have a real independence. What do you mean real? Remember when we were independent before we brought in the military from Papua New Guinea? You still own all our land. We independent. We got all our land back. We control the ports. We are independent because we control. Then Australia asked Vanuatu, why are you building a military force? Said, you got to have a force to protect your people. That's what the presidents of the Sahel region know. You cannot be secure with a handful of foreign French troops in Niger, Burkina Faso. You don't have a strong military. You can't do anything. So the same way that Niger, Burkina Faso, all of those who kicked out, what's the first thing they do? You bring in recruits and you get somebody to help you build a powerful military police force to control your borders and security. So the same way when I got there, you had some French and some English troops. Vanuatu has a police force. And that's why they couldn't do it. So one of the first things that the military in the Coup along the Sahel did, the same thing I recognize Vanuatu. They got foreign help, put out all the English and the French. At that point, Australia wanted the United States to militarily intervene to overthrow Father Lily. So all of the Pacific Islands said that if you make that attempt, we're going to fight throughout all of the South Pacific. The threat of the war, you got to have a damn gun, or they take you out. So weapons is very important. So again, just using from what they're stating, Burkina Faso. When we see the spread, they're dealing with at least 15 countries for everything, in industrialization, weapons, training, skilled people. Where you going to go to the French? You going to go to the English? You going to go to white people? You out of your mind. So that's what you have to do. You got to have a strong military, one, and now these, to use Burkina Faso, they now have other people who can help. You can go to Russia for this, Germany for this, Australia for them, down in South Africa. Africans are training each other. They're saying, we are going to trade and work with whoever we want. And that's how you do it. But a lot of it has to do with the gun.
Who's gun? I mean,
you get you some weapons.
No, Africa has that kind of firepower. These countries in West Africa has that kind of firepower now?
I don't know. So let's look at it. Under the French, in these three countries, they're all of them the same. You have 20 million people in Niger. Just give me an overview. You had 1,500 French troops, fully armed. And you had American military, that surveillance thing. They got troops on the ground. You got a police force. You don't even have a military. You got a police force. You got, what, a few hundred men with light weapons fighting against these Arab jihadists that United States put there? They made everybody know the jihadists. They started jihadists to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. The United States worked with some of the other countries like India and stuff. Not really. They worked and they had jihadists there. They used them there. When they destroyed Libya, they used the jihadists. Those Arab or whatever you want to call them men who are giving trouble to those countries in the Sahel or Boko Haram, they were put there. After the United States knocked off Libya, weakened the whole area, then they put them in. The drones, they use the drones for, surveillance. They use the drones for weapons and stuff. So how are you, if you are Burkina Faso, Mali, you're fighting a band of people who have weapons, more powerful weapons than you. They got jeeps. They got surveillance. The U.S. is giving them surveillance to direct them. So they got more weapons than you. So you put a contingent of 50 men in this city with machine guns. And then you get attacked by the jihadists who have bazookas. Small cannons, plus you got the French and the Europeans, all of them are shooting at you. When you get shot, I've never been in a war, but when you get shot, you don't know who shot you. You dead. Okay? So now what Burkina Faso is saying, first we get the French out, then we go Russia or whoever's going to help train us. They said they're training a military. So hopefully Burkina Faso will have a military, 5, 10, 15, 20,000 men. That's a military. Then you get your weapons, Russia show you get the surveillance. The same way the United States do surveillance with the satellite, and they tell Ukraine how to use it against Russia. They do the surveillance and they direct the jihadists moving here, tell them what to do and weaponize them. So now they are building a military, 10,000, 15,000 weapons. They're getting, I'm not a military person, these armored personnel carriers, helicopters, jet fighters. French didn't give you any jet fighters. They didn't give you a helicopter. They didn't train you. They made sure you had a total military of 500 men, and they got 1,000, 1,500. So it isn't so much big, powerful weapons. You got Russia, China, North Korea. You got anybody will help you because they can do business with you.
Lady V?
I wanted you to touch on Guyana and Venezuela.
I can't touch on Guyana and Venezuela because I don't know anything about it. The only reason that I can say is there's a border dispute. The borders in Guyana and Venezuela, they've all been in dispute. And there's a lot of oil there. United States, Guyana wants the United States to help them against Venezuela. How they will resolve it, don't have a clue. It's hundreds of billions. You're talking.
Right.
They got to resolve
Yeah.
Now.
But the U.S. and they want them to fight, and while
Of course.
they're fighting, they will steal the land and say, "I owe
it. Okay,
you."
well here's the point.
So y'all will be new slaves.
Venezuela, they say they're going to go and
Yes,
they're going to talk with Russia. They're going to talk with China. They're going to talk with Brazil, the region. How should we handle it? They got to work it out among themselves with Guyana. Okay? So Guyana's going to have to sit down with Venezuela, and they're going to have a conference with the people in the area, and then Guyana might say, I want the United States to sit with me. I don't know why they would want that, but I want the United States to sit. Or I don't trust them. I want Argentina to sit. And then Chavez, he's going to get Russia. They have to work it out. Share it, split it. But with the United States has been stealing Venezuelan oil since 1918. And now they can't steal it. They're going to switch over to Guyana, put everything in.
Exactly.
These, Medley Pablo, tell you. So the best I can say is Guyana is going to have to work with the international community to work it out. Now, I can't say nobody else can say any more than that.
But
yeah.
Dr. Lewis, so Guyana is an example of what you just said, is a piece of landmass and people who don't have any type of military protection. So they become the victim, just like you said just a few minutes ago. Am I correct?
Yeah, if the British were in Guyana, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Why did the British leave them with 20,000 armed men, 20,000 well-armed men?
That's right.
Tanks and everything else. Where Venezuela would have to back up, just what you said. They're not going to build up your military.
They want to
They
take
were
the
kept
oil.
like this.
They want the oil the same way they
But
wanted
see,
it from Niger.
They're being bullied, they're taking advantage of people who, that's what's people's land and oil who've been there forever. I mean, how dare they bully those people like they're doing it, either behind the beat. But it's an example of what you just said, if you don't have any military
Well,
protection.
look at Venezuela. When Obama was this, Trump was in, didn't we see him on TV planning on how to overthrow Venezuela?
Exactly.
The problem with that, what happened, why that didn't work, was Venezuela was helped by Russia, military, China, some military, but they kept the economy going, to get oil, to build up the economy with buses and stuff. Russia will do the military component. Iran came in to help them with the oil.
And that's the only reason America backed up.
Yeah, that's right. They helped them with the oil. They say Cuba, they call mosquitoes or what, 40,000 of the best troops in the world. So so Venezuela put 100,000 men on the border with Colombia. And those troops were Venezuelan troops. They were Cuban troops.
Right.
The point is, you don't know who was. You just know when you get shot. You understand whoever shoots you, a Venezuelan, a Cuban, That's why they couldn't do it. Because they got enough military equipment to protect itself. They jump on, and one of the things that the Sahel countries have said, the military between Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, they're officially together, but all of these areas are in an informal military bloc. Because when they were threatening to attack Niger, Algeria said they will send troops, they're not going to allow it. Morocco, Tunisia said they will send troops. Chad said it.
All right, so
Let me finish. Guinea, to let the stuff come in. They're already a military bloc. The French doesn't have anything to come in. They unity. You block, you put your military together, your surveillance together, so they can't pick you off one by one.
okay, Zoom audience, anybody got a question? All right.
Okay, let them go. So the health, we'll probably just have to skip the health. Go on.
Look, in the Godfather, I mean, we asking questions that are so academic and obvious, between Venezuela and the guy. Look, the Godfather said, whoever comes to you first with the deal is the traitor. And we don't even understand what he was saying when he said that. So, of course, if you go to America first, that means you know damn good, because you know America's dirty. So if you go to America, you want the upper hand against Venezuela.
Why did go on.
But my point is, what I wanted to ask you before you close, is that it shows how vindictive the former colonizers are when Guinea was throwing out the French. What did they do to Secretary? They took all the plumbing and the wiring, everything, and he said, take it.
Angola.
He said, damn it.
Angola.
No.
Well, it's a concept, regardless of which country you want to put it to.
This
It's
was
the
Guinea.
concept.
This was Guinea with Secretary.
Mozambique.
No, look.
Why is it
Look.
He's from Guyana.
The same thing.
Conceptually, the point still remains
Right.
with respect to the European mind. The Caucasian, he will blood suck you, and at the point where you say, you gotta go, he says, well, I'm gonna take back my plumbing. All the wiring I did, I'm gonna take all that back. This happened with Secretary in Guinea, and Ghana came to his aid.
Exactly.
So I know what I'm talking
So
about.
it's the
It was Ghana who came in and said, let them take the plumbing, let them take the wiring. They can take
They
sinks,
should have left with nothing.
toilet bowls, they can take whatever they want, and we will resupply, which Ghana did.
Yeah, but they weren't going to. The United States wasn't interested in Guyana until they lost the Venezuelan oil.
So my point is, the European mind is going to take whatever they can take,
Whatever they can take.
can. That's the
It's
overriding.
exactly. That's right. You gotta have the force. The brother,
That's why you need a gun.
you need a gun, and he said
So when you
security.
tell them to leave, you say, damn it, go is that way.
Right.
Go. You ain't taking nothing.
And that's what this whole group, the whole Central Union said you got to have collective security or these people will wipe you out. That's why the whole region is blocking together.
Right.
So there's mutual
That's what it
security.
takes. Unity.
Because that's what they did when the Haitians was on the Texas border. They let them leave with what was on their back. So we got to do the same thing.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Lewis a great big hand. Zoom audience, give yourself a great big hand for supporting the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club.
Cash out.
If you want to help out, you know what's in the chat. If you want to help us out, this is part 6 of Doc. He will be back. But if you got time, go into YouTube and you got all the lectures and do your research. So give yourself a great big hand and we're going to rock it down.